Lions Rock Productions.
Let's talk a little bit about when we do leave camp. So, like you were saying before, you guys would walk off. There was in our little cluster, there was a 2-vehicle exemption, which was not meant for operations. It was
Right.
meant for A to B transportation. But
Yep.
we needed
used
that.
it. Yep.
We didn't have 4 vehicles.
Well, exactly. That's what they didn't understand when they took us in. We're here, we're in your wire, but I need more from you than I'm going to give you back. And that was tough. But yeah, we ended up a lot of our missions because a lot of the stuff came out of Gradacic and Modrica. So anybody that was leaving base camp that had a convoy going wherever we needed to go, we would tag along. So it was that in the mornings a lot. I'd have the Humvee fired up and I would just sit there and wait for somebody else leaving and be like, where are you going? And, wherever they said they were going, if we had stuff we had to do there, be like, great, we're coming with. So it was, that was tough. And a lot of commanders didn't, they had a tough time with a team of 4 people walking out of the base camp and saying, it's noon and saying, I'll probably be back by 10 o'clock tonight. And they would flip. They would not have it. That was not a warm and fuzzy.
That was the problem with the base camp mentality. And honestly, we took that into Iraq with us.
Mm-hmm.
First, I wasn't part of the military then, but I could see the issues of bunkering, hunkering down, in the bunker mentality on the base camps that it wasn't until where they had the surge of 2006 that started it for the first several years. The watchword was, if you're going to be a successful commander there, you have to bring out everybody you brought in. That was the only measure of success. Not that you've achieved the mission, is that nothing bad happened. And so guess what happened? Lots of bad things.
Exactly right. Yep.
So and I knew that because I was running the INSCOM training program where we were sending instructors out to teach DSIGs. We're sending them out to different base camps. And they just when they came back, they said, the amount of the incredible amount of restrictions to do anything on the base camp and then to get off was next to impossible. To go from one to another, I was like, this is as bad as it was in the Balkans, and in the Balkans it was the same thing.
Yeah, it was. I was very lucky in the area I was at. We had greased the skids enough that if we had to have a convoy, we would either take the PSYOPs or civil affairs guys with us. So that's that, and we'd have one Humvee from 11 Cav, which I always didn't. I never liked that because they always had a 50 cal on the mount on the vehicle, and I was like, I can't do my job when you roll into a town and you've got a guy sitting on that 50, and he's just swinging around and watching people. I get the tactical need for it, very well. I mean, I was in the 82nd a long time. I understand that, but I got to be able to talk to people that aren't terrified.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, but we were lucky in the area I was doing with 11 Cav. We were able to get off base camp probably more than most of the teams in country. We had a lot of leeway, which thank goodness. Actually, I think one of the commanders there was hoping, God, I hope they just don't come back. So, but we kept coming back and we kept giving them intel. So
this ability to get off the camp, it is rare. We were able to do it in part because Bart got us to do a vulnerability assessment, and no one had done that. Right. And then that became like our team product. And so we got shopped out. We went to all kinds of places. We went to, it must have been 10 different camps to go specific, not just in our cluster. Well, we got pushed out to some hilltop somewhere with a bunch of Delta Force guys on there. And they're like, we don't know why you're here. Just draw a picture of the concertina and leave, And so we did our job and we did that. But But that also made us valuable to the command. We could say, hey, we have to go do this. We'll be gone for a week. Like, where are you going? Like, well, we can't tell you. But if you look at Sarajevo, that's probably where we'll be, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when he got us back, he's like, man, I got to keep these guys around. And so he fought even harder for us to keep us there. But we had to leave, and he got it. We had to leave the camp every day. What I want to ask you, John, is you get to a new area. We didn't know anything about these areas. Like, we had some overview of some history and everything. Yeah. How do you decide where to push your guys? I mean, the moment maybe you didn't know this time, the moment we step off camp, we really are targetable. And,
absolutely.
So how do you do that? How do you go out knowing you don't have enough stuff? And if you get into a firefight, we're a bunch of CI people. We can't shoot.
I'll tell you, we talked our way out of some bad situations. The Bosnian Serbs were the ones that gave us the most friction. Bosnian Muslims were great to us, and the Croats were great to us. There was a town called Modrica that was Bosnian Serb controlled, and every time we would go in there, we would get a hard time from somebody. And I can remember my little walkie-talkie that they obviously had no idea that it was way out of range of anybody. I sitting in a bar doing our thing, and a couple of Bosnian Serb soldiers were giving us a hard time. And I said, listen, I have to check in every 30 minutes with this. If I miss a check-in, I'll die happily knowing that this entire grid square is going to be a parking lot. And they just left us alone. And I literally, when they walked away, I was like, whew, almost got my ass kicked that time. It was tough from the strategic standpoint, because you always want a guy, or tactical standpoint, you always want a guy at the vehicle. And that's where, that's the only place that radio was being listened to. And my rule was, we're not going to go more than, 350, 400 meters from the vehicle. We'd get in as close as we could. And we had a pretty good feeling in most of the cities. We had done enough legwork with some of the civilians that we knew where not to go, and again, we bought them Game Boys, cigarettes, booze. And so in a lot of those places, they hadn't had any American cigarettes in forever. And, I'm sure, Pete, you remember how many cartons upon cartons of Marlboros they would give us. And I would, we use those as kind of our payment, paying our toll. And it worked. We had in Tremosnica is one of the towns that was in the Croat area. The locals there were more protective of us than they were their own soldiers. They felt like we were kind of like the saving grace. Nothing bad's going to happen as long as there's an I-4 presence in town. They also had no idea if things went to hell in a handbasket. We took a lot of risks. There was not a whole lot we could do. Eric, Pete, and I were talking about the fact that, we got to the point where it was 2 9mm and 2 M16s on a team, and you're like,
yeah,
and carrying a firefight.
Yeah,
no, that's what. Yeah, most of these locals didn't understand. If there's a firefight, I'm going to find a secure place for my team to hunker down, and then we'll leave later.
And that was one of the command guidance pieces was, while we are in country, we will never lose a single tactical fight.
Yep.
And that's why, the convoys had to go out. And, what was sad is, even from the base camp when we first started in Lukovac, we had to take these massive convoys. Well, right next to it was Lukovac was the Brown and Root contractor camp.
Yeah.
And my roommate from college worked there as a Brown and Root analyst. And so I pulled up, I got my battle rattle on. We've got, you have to have at least one crew serve weapon that goes with each of the convoys, whatever. And I go see this guy, he's in a sweatshirt and jeans.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's making triple what we were making at the time, tax-free. It was just incrable. And it's great to see my roommate. Unfortunately, he passed away very early in his life, but I got a photo with him just to show how distinct it was between what contractor was doing and what the rest of us were doing. Yep. And even the Norwegian, the Nordpol Brigade, Norwegian Polish, they were actually, I guess, giving me a hard time while we were up there with the convoy visiting one of the teams. And he said, yeah, you guys have to have convoys wherever you go. And my only answer was, because there will never be a photo of us chained to an air defense site.
That is very true.
You guys had.
Very true. And that's a great answer. Yep. Yeah. It was very, very challenging. And I'm probably, I took more risks than I ever should have with my team. And, it was really because we just felt the need to, I think everybody that deployed in that first group that went in, I think we all felt a really strong sense of responsibility, to satisfy what we had to satisfy, but also to help some of these other warfighters understand the asset that they had. And that if I know there were sites, I know Sergeant Hyde, Liz Hyde was on one of the teams where they would never let them leave ever. And she ended up, and she was one of the best agents I had ever met. And she was literally doing radio watch in the S2 shop all night on a duty roster. And I was livid. I was like, they just don't, some of them just didn't get it. Some of the commanders were really, really good. Some of them had been, I guess they took whatever briefing they needed to get to heart to let us give them what we wanted to give them, as well as satisfying everything else. But it was tough. It was really tough.
That danger element and you're saying probably took too many risks. When do you realize that? I mean, we took risks too, like, you know, but that was our job. I mean, our job is dangerous, right? And
It
we
is.
live in that danger, but we took a lot of risks.
We took a lot more than most people, I think, realize. You know, there was a feeling that we would get especially if we were tasked by the local commander and it wasn't coming from, you know, 165th or our G2. There were some things that they were asking us to do that, you know, some of them were just patently crazy. And I would say, no, that's not what we do. But there were times that we would kind of roll into a city or Abstina, those small little villages. You say city and people have a thought process that's way different than what we actually saw. You know, we'd roll into an area and you just get that feeling. You know, you would see very few people on the streets. And they wouldn't. The big thing is, you know, everywhere we went, Pete, I'm sure you remember, they'd run up to the vehicles, the kids, and they'd be asking for candy or water. And couple of times we would roll into an area and nobody came up to the vehicle. And I was like, no, we're not staying here. We got to go. It was just that you get that hair on the back of your neck. That's like, nah, this is bad news. So,
and then you just get on the gas and get the hell out of there.
And then, Tom Gage was my driver. And Tom it was funny, before we deployed, I think Tom had driven maybe 300 kilometers in his life in a Humvee. And I was like, well, you're about to earn your driver's badge, son, because you're driving the whole time. And he ended up being a really good driver, but there were times there'd be concertina wire across the road that was thrown there after we went by, and he'd be rolling up on it. He's like, what am I supposed to do? And I was like, gun it. It's a Humvee. Go right through that. If it tears stuff up, we got mechanics that'll fix it. Just keep going. So yeah, there was a lot of risks, but there was a lot of reward too. You know, we did things there that, you know, when I'm not sure if you knew Eric, both Pete and I were at Huachuca together as instructors. Right. And there were things that we had done in country that were very, I remember, God, what was his name? I think, can't remember his name, but he was a CW2 at the schoolhouse. And when we got there, you know, he was like, you can't say source ops, because what you guys did really wasn't source ops. And I kind of agree. With him to an extent. I said, but it was effective. So maybe your version of what a source op is, you know, we would write those reports, Pete, one-time source, multiple contact. Yeah. We kind of wrote the book on those small team ops in a way. If not wrote it, we certainly updated it. And, you know, it became effective the way that we were doing things. It wouldn't work in every environment for sure. I mean, there's no way that you could operate that way in the Gulf or, you know, anywhere in Afghanistan. You can't operate that way. But we were fortunate that we were able to operate that way in Bosnia.
And we had recruited sources. I mean, not trying to get classified stuff going on. So I don't know what else you would call that. You may not like that version of it. We may not have gone to Bosnia, but guess what? I'm in Bosnia and I'm recruiting sources. I'm recruiting.
Yeah. Well, here's my thing. What makes a source? Well, I've asked him to do this for me, and I've given him some form of payment. He's, you know, whether it's, you know, stuff for his family. I mean, I probably shouldn't say it, but we used, you know, the fund that we had. There was a guy that I knew was full of intel. So we replaced the roof on his house. And as long as I could justify that in a report, we were okay.
This is a thing I want to ask you about. I obviously don't want to talk about classified stuff, but I had no idea as a E4 who's never deployed anything about ICF or just incentives that we give to people. Because all we'd ever heard is like, you're a bad collector if you have to use them. And that turned out to be bullshit.
Absolutely not true. It may have been in other environments.
Right.
But the environment we were in there, it went, you know, there's one guy that all we gave him was a Game Boy and some games for his son.
Yeah.
And he ended up I won't say working for it, but he ended up giving us stuff the whole time we were there because we bothered to think about his kid. You know, there was a lot of stuff. I mean, there were people that I met in Grachitz who had lost loved ones and they weren't sure where they were, if they were alive. And, you know, we would go into, because we're up in that the upper northern Posavina corridor, literally towns switched hands. You know, you'd have a town that was served before the war and they abandoned it because the ones the Bosnian Muslims had was a nicer village. And so they would take their stuff and people would flip flop and families would lose sight of stuff. One of the guys that I ended up just taking him with us on a convoy to Modrica so he could see his old house. That's all he wanted to do was see his old house. And he became one of the most valuable guys I had because he was a local that we were using as an interpreter. And nobody ever questioned anything he was doing. So it was cool.
One of the best connections that we ever made was an introduction. We got that introduction because I was talking to a guy, and where we were, you could tell the homes by the roof type, and then if it went on, you could tell like these were all the Catholics, and they killed them all, or
exactly right.
So they were now rebuilding these things, and this guy, I'm like, what do you guys need? What's it like to be you? Just day in life. And he's like, oh my God, we go out every day, we work our asses off trying to rebuild our lives, and we get pounded by this sun. And I'm like, would some sunscreen help? I mean, that's something that I would like, that'd be like a gift from God. And so we came back the next day, no plans to do this specifically, but we're like, we're gonna bring, and just because we were good people, and we, it's the Army, we got boxes and boxes of sunscreen.
Right.
I was like over the moon that we did this. He's like, I want to introduce you to some people.
Yeah. And we had that in Srebrenica, or Srebrenik, excuse me. It was a Croat town. Same kind of thing. We bought, their water was horrible, and people are always having stomach problems. For some reason, one of the nurses groups or hospitals back in the States, we ended up getting a case of Maalox, the liquid Maalox. So next time we rolled out of the wire, I kept telling the guys on my team, save everything. We don't know when we're going to need it. And next time we rolled down there, we gave one of the locals a case of Maalox, and he gave us a lot of the background stuff that we didn't have yet. He told us who the gun runners were during the war, the routes they were using, the routes they were still using, where some of the caches were, and all because we did something as innocuous as here, man. I hope your stomach feels better.
Yeah,
Maalox was great.